If I'm not mistaken, I'm the only judge here, so I guess we're just kind of chilling. Cool.
Lily Pearl, if y'all want to send your email now, I can start making the email chain. And it's the one in your paradigm fine.
Sorry, my partner's just trying to figure out the Wi-Fi because it's kind of finicky here.
Did you all see there was a judge change? You're gonna get two new judges. Cool.
I'm gonna rejoin on the internet and figure that out real quick.
Uh, Cayman, sorry. The email in your paradigm's good for the email chain, right?
Yes, it is.
Sounds good.
I just emailed Tab about the other judge not being here yet, so hopefully that speeds things up a little bit. Cool.
Newton, I don't know if you saw, but we got another judge change. Hey, Benjamin, would you like to send your email so that I can add you to the email chain?
Sure. I literally just got this message 30 seconds ago. I'm
We'll
still
hopefully
in my-
make it a little fun.
All right, here you go. All right. Give me like 2 seconds. I have to pull up my flow. I'm going to flow it on computer. Ah, that's what happened. Oh, understood. Okay. Sorry. I'm going as fast as I can, y'all. I promise. I know everybody wants to debate.
No worries.
Have you guys sent the email chain yet?
No, I was gonna send the doc when everyone is good.
I'm good. You can
So
start.
if everyone, yeah, if everyone's good, I'll send the doc. Let me know and you'll get it.
I got it.
Did everyone else get it?
Yeah, we got
Anna, you're good?
All right, if everyone's ready, I'll start my time. For more than 100 years, policy debate was dominated by white people who refused to acknowledge any inclusion concerns. However, in the early 2000s, debaters from Louisville recognized that debate had the potential to be more than just a competition. By not suppressing, but rather pointing to their identity, Louisville's use of personal anecdotes forced policy debaters to focus on the racialization of debate itself. Debaters found success with identity-based arguments that were evaluated alongside public interrogation of debate's discriminatory biases. According to Reed Brinkley in 2008, the Louisville debater challenged the relationship between social power and knowledge. Those with social power within the debate community are able to produce and determine, quote, legitimate knowledge, crowding out alternative knowledge. The Louisville debater seeks to supplement what counts as evidence with other forms of knowledge produced outside of academia. Personal experience provides a method of argumentation that taps into diverse forms of knowledge-making practices. Personal experiences are placed on par with traditional forms of evidence that exclude racial and ethnic minorities from policy-oriented discussions because of their lack of training and expertise. Such exclusions prevent radical solutions to racism, classism, sexism, and homophobia. However, as Black debaters in the Louisville Project became more successful and policy became a safer space for minorities to have necessary discussions, a group of individuals thought that something had to be done to, quote, save the activity. So in 2002, debate had its own white flight. Public forum was created as a safe haven for the white model, insulating itself from arguments that forced white competitors to acknowledge the privilege ingrained in the activity and shutting out the personal experiences of minority debaters. In the spirit of the Louisville Pathfinders, we've compiled some research of our own on the state of PF. Here are some quotes from paradigms at this tournament and others. Quote, Ks have no place in PF. Judges literally say their tab and then tell performance debaters to strike them. Another says, if not defending a plan is your thing, I'm not your judge. And my personal favorite, we need to put the public back in public forum. Judges are indoctrinated into thinking that non-traditional arguments don't belong in PF. Adults in PF are comfortable advocating for segregation, and why not? This is why the event exists. Further, topics like this force debaters to engage in threat construction of Asia. Debaters fear Chinese nuclear weapons, which justifies liberal militarism and colonial humanism. Lockwood 19. The international system is socially constructed. Perceptions are filtered through an artificial civilized, uncivilized dichotomy. It will become real. The disparity is no accident. Racialized discourses sustain the assumption that the global south is naturally destined to be an exporter of raw materials. Colonialism is the root cause of supposed internal problems. Colonial divide and rule spawn civil wars. Racism makes destitution appear natural. Scholars hold that irresponsible non-Western states with nuclear weapons represent an objective threat based on false Orientalist characterizations of the self as rational and responsible. Such erroneous analysis filters into the subconscious of Western leaders, heightening distrust and increasing the risk of fatal miscalculations. Racist logic subverts people's perception of the real interests. Thus, vote for the team that best disrupts oppression in this space. 3 warrants. 1. Small schools. Empirically, minority debaters from small schools have used their own experiences and recyclable arguments to overcome systemic inequalities. This encourages diverse participation, which benefits everyone. 2. Survival skills. This allows debates to challenge racialized structures. Voting can't pass a resolution, and most debaters won't be policymakers, but every student will interact with racist structures. We always outweigh on the probability of generating useful portable skills, especially in PF where detailed plans are literally banned. Impact calc isn't a real world skill. Fighting oppression is. 3. Accessibility comes prior to fairness in education. A, your arguments presuppose that people feel safe enough in the space to respond to it, but even if the space is psychologically violent, this comes flexibly prior, because if the space is inaccessible, it doesn't matter if it's unfair or uneducational, since people won't be in it in the first place. And B, psychological violence spills outside of debate. It'll traumatize people and can leave people harmed for long periods of time. Unfairness at worst would make you go complain to your coach. We have the best method under our rule of about our rejection of a terribly violent resolution in favor of historical, rhetorical, and analytic research on public forum allows us to practice a valuable skill. Affirming our personal research sets the norm that this type of research has a home in PF, creating a safer debate space and giving us the tools to address evidentiary gaps left by academic institutions to effectively challenge oppressive structures in and out of debate. Additionally, our refusal of both the topic and traditional forms of debate creates the site for new knowledge production. Tuck and Yang 13. Refusal is not a prohibition, but a generative form. Refusal turns the gaze back upon power. It makes transparent the meta-narrative of knowledge production. By refusing to teleal the colonial future, desire expand possible futures. Consider using strategies of social science research to further expose the complexity of social science disciplines in the project of colonialism, as opposed to universal, liberal, or neutral knowledge without horizon. This might include bringing attention to the mechanisms of knowledge legitimation. Your ballot can't determine Japan's militarization, but it can produce real, tangible change in public forum. Ballots shape trends. Louisville inspired us. We can inspire the next generation. Don't listen to appeals to rules. The rules said Black people were property. Rules justified concentration camps. If you wouldn't intervene on topical questions, we better not start now. Pratik and I want you to use your ballot to normalize our engagement and make this discussion loud. We are the public and we belong here.
We're going to take a few seconds of prep time. That was 10 seconds of prep. Is everybody ready for me to begin? My time is going to start on my first word. Lily and I negate resolve. Japan should revise Article 9 of its constitution to develop offensive military capabilities. Our sole contention is emboldening China. As Zhang 21 writes, it would be a diplomatic disaster for Japan if Kishida tries to strengthen ties with China while also trying to revise the constitution. Additionally, CFR 17 finds that Chinese people's trust in Japan's adherence to pacifism becomes essential for any improvement of the bilateral relationship. Critically, Wadsworth 19 writes that an offensively armed Japan would likely increase tensions with China, who would use Japanese rearmament as an excuse to further increase its aggressive presence around the disputed territories. Anchoring China has two severe implications on East Asia. Subpoint A is a Taiwan-China conflict. Currently, Japan is deterring China from invading Taiwan. Acts 21 confirms that a willingness by Japan to send its troops into battle over Taiwan severely complicates Chinese planning to the point of making an invasion unacceptably risky. Nakayama furthers that Japan has to show deterrence to China. However, revising Article 9 would counterintuitively embolden China. Sachs 21 writes that as Chinese military capabilities continue to grow, the US and Japan need to make preparing for a conflict in the Taiwan Strait a top priority. The impact is war. Mozau 17 finds that a Taiwan invasion could stimulate a worldwide financial crisis and escalate an asymmetric operation into a full military invasion with all attendant risks. Unfortunately, Lopez 22 writes that the war in Ukraine has shown how this could play out. Ukrainian resistance has been fiercer than anyone expected, killing thousands of Russian troops according to US estimates. The same could prove true in Taiwan, where polls find that nearly 3/4 of the population is willing to fight a Chinese invasion. Finally, Sachs 21 writes that how well the US and Japan are able to deter an attack on Taiwan could determine Asia's future as well as their own. Subpoint B is the Senkaku Islands. According to Richter 16, Japan and China are currently in disputes over a chain of uninhabited islands in the East China Sea known as the Senkaku Islands. This dispute erupted in 2012 when the Japanese government purchased 3 of the islands from their private Japanese owner. For decades, China has wanted ownership over the Senkaku Islands. Right now, China is aggressing towards Japan in the islands. As Wang 21 writes, the Chinese Coast Guard has increased the activity near the Japanese-controlled islands, raising alarm in Tokyo. Unfortunately, revising Article 9 furthers aggression. Hornung 20 writes, Japan's acquisition of strike capability could represent a dramatic shift in Northeast Asia's military competition. Regardless of what Japan calls its new capabilities, the region will see them as offensive weapons, and China is bound to react negatively. The first impact is a Japan-China war. Richter 16 writes that reinterpretation of Article 9 could further increase the likelihood of Japan in such a conflict with China. That's why Hornung 20 finds that China may actually have incentives to preemptively attack Japan to ensure early success. Lastly, Bowman 14 estimates that an invasion of the Senkaku Islands and islands surrounding would lead to 100,000 to 500,000 deaths. The second impact is an America-China war. Padalano 20 writes that a conflict between the two Asian powers would not remain confined to the waters around the islands. This is because the US would back Japan in a war scenario. Additionally, Gompert 16 writes that China could underestimate US willingness to back Japan militarily in the Senkaku Islands, and China's claim of sovereignty over the area, including the islands, could bring forces into close and hazardous proximity. The third impact is on Japan's economy. Huang 12 writes that if disputes led to a breakdown in the relations that interrupted production and triggered boycotts, there would be major implications. The two countries' bilateral trade makes up $340 billion, and China is Japan's #1 export market. For these reasons, Lily and I strongly urge a neg ballot. Are you ready for Crossfire, or do you guys want any cards?
I'm good to go.
Okay, cool. Would you like the first question?
Sure. How does Japan change Article 9? What does the process for that look like?
We'd say that it doesn't really matter what the process is. The resolution changes Article 9. That's the point of the resolution.
Okay, do you have a question?
Sure. So you guys say that, so what exactly would you say is the method in which you're going to win this debate? What do you think needs to be the method?
So what we read in our speech of what we're proposing is that the role of the ballot in this round should be to vote for the team that best disrupts oppression. And what our method looks like for that is to engage in non-traditional forms of debate in order to allow for more voices. Okay, so would that include any type of non-resolutional debate? Any type of what we're proposing? Or what so if you're saying that whoever best interrupts the current public forum setup wins the debate, right? So not necessarily. We're not necessarily just merely interrupting the space. We're talking about addressing oppression in the space.
Okay, sure. So whoever best addresses oppression in the space wins. So this doesn't necessarily have to be in the form of rejecting the resolution.
Yeah, well, like y'all can make that argument and then we
Okay,
can
cool. Do
debate
you have a
about that.
question?
Sure. Why is impact calculus a useful skill?
Impact calculus? I'm not sure what you mean by that.
Yeah, like you know how in topical debates a lot of the times, especially in PF, it boils down to like, oh, our scenario includes like extinction, or our scenario includes the deaths of however many million people. Why is that a useful skill? Like how is that becoming a useful skill in the real world?
So I mean, we'd say that in the real world, the way that PF is used, it's through its research skills, it's the skills to research current events and learn about the world around us. I wouldn't say that necessarily impact calculus is what rounds tend to come down to. I'd say that in the world of PF, it tends to be the person who has the most research and has prepared the most for a topic.
Okay, do you have a question?
Yeah, sure. So in terms of the social power and debate, why would you say that right now there's like PF is really exclusive?
So there's a couple reasons we give you for that. First is like from its inception, it was born out of an escape from a policy space that was becoming more welcoming towards minority voices. But in general, what we see right now that also reflects that sort of history is that judges and competitors alike aren't really welcoming to any sorts of like the sorts of non-traditional arguments we talk about that would address safety concerns or concerns of like violence or issues that someone cares about that might not necessarily pertain to a topic, especially a topic that is inherently violent or leads to inherently violent arguments.
I mean, I would say that pretty much all topics are inherently violent, but I think that's crossfire.
Okay.
I'm sending the cards and analytics in the email chain. Is that good with everyone? Cool. Not everything is written, but most of it is. Let me know when y'all get that. Is everyone good? Oh, okay, cool. They didn't respond to any of our case in their first constructives, which means you're going to err heavily on the side of the affirmative. The role of the odds conceded, which is to vote for the debater that best disrupts oppression in this space. We're going to go for a few of the warrants, but Jim might go for a few more in the summary. First is the survival skill warrants. This is incredibly important. We're the only ones that generate any useful skill inside of the real world. There are two types of survival skills that we generate. First is the skills to be able to reform public forum itself. We have made several arguments as to why the structure of public forum is necessarily violent through its creation, but also through norms within judges and competitors right now, which is why our survival skills are key to combating that. But more importantly, we allow for debaters to generate skills similar to like the policy making skills that people usually talk about. But our skills are more important because they're more relevant to the real world. Everyone will engage in racialized structures, but not everyone will become a policymaker. There's also a time frame argument that our skills are more important because you have 15 more years at least until you become a policymaker, whereas you're in debate right now, which means our survival skills are important right now, whereas you'll have 15 more years to learn about policymaking skills. Now, on case proper, extend the Lockwood evidence. Topics that focus on Asian conflict encourage debaters to engage in West versus the West rhetoric. It forces Western countries to treat every non-Western threat as an existential one. We trust political leaders in the UN because they look like us, but we don't trust Xi because we have not yet bestowed humanity upon him. The logic also encourages miscalculation because when white policymakers see any action from Asians, they immediately jump into fight or flight. Our argument is not that you should vote for us because we are minorities, but because we increase avenues for minority participation. By affirming our method of personal research innovated by debaters like Liz Antonia from Louisville, who succeeded in combating anti-blackness in policy, you allow us to change the system of public forum, which was born out of white flight from policy debate. Your ballot helps show the other debaters, judges, and coaches that our evidentiary practices and discussion have a home here, and you help us deconstruct problematic orientalist violence and problematic biases. Now, additional solvency. A point, Louisville Project and Emporia SW proved when they read non-traditional forms of engagement, it not only included increased minority participation in college policy, but also proliferated their arguments similar to their leading, which led to like more call-outs and a safer debate space as a whole. And B, this round is literally being streamed. This means that your affirmation of our method is even more important. You need to show that to the public forum community that our form of engagement is something that is winnable and is something that it should be accepted in the space. Your ballots can do that. Now, their method is extremely, incredibly violent. First is the recognition of law. Just that you only deem ideas legitimate only if they are supported by government action. But a lot of change happens socially and through grassroots. Second, policymaking education isn't relevant. None of us are going to become policymakers, and even if we do, it would be at least 10 years, which is at least 10 more years to learn. This is the argument that I was kind of making above. Three, people like Ted Cruz and Matt Gaetz prove that debates about policymaking skills literally breeds rapists, racists, and warmongers. Four, cruel optimism dissent. Policymaking knowledge doesn't change policy. Gilliland, page 14. A systematic quantitative model for nearly 2,000 policy issues produced striking findings. The preferences of the average American appear to only have minuscule, near zero, statistically non-significant impact on public policy, nor do organized interest groups substitute. The majority does not rule in the casual sense of policy outcomes because of the strong status quo biases. We see no reason to think that informational expertise is always accompanied by an inclination to transcend one's own interest. And five, the political in the context of the topic is bad. That's the Lockwood evidence at the top, which means even if policymaking skills are good, RKA has to come lexically prior to deconstruct the biases that infect policymaking now. Six, our literature will always end up taking a backseat to extinction outweighs arguments, and it also hurts minorities that by crowding out our discussions. And seven, PF debate isn't policymaking. Impact calc and non-detailed plans just don't provide skills that translate over. Presidential debates or congressional hearings don't do any of that. Our skills are the only ones that are translatable. Eight, policymaking itself is crowded by white people. Minorities are shut out and marginalized. Think about how the government gives land to indigenous people and then completely disregards sovereignty and things like the Keystone XL pipeline plowing right through it. And nine, assimilation just said you only call for including radical scholarship if they conform to what you think scholarship should look like. We are net better by allowing for your forms of debate and our forms of debate to include it. So so people can do what they're most comfortable with. Now, the important thing to remember is that we're not saying that a conversation is enough. What we're advocating for is in a debate space that allows for constant discussions and new forms of engagement. We think debate as an activity can be good. It's just not good in its current form, and affirming our method will create that space. There was a few more things that were written. I'm going to send that right now.
We're going to take a bit of prep time, I guess, once you send that over. Have you sent over everything from rebuttal?
I'm sending it right now.
Okay.
It's just the 8 point. I just sent it. My bad. I didn't realize it was ready.
So then our prep time will start now.
Okay.
Sorry, we had that as a minute 10.
We had that as a minute 10. Everyone good?
We've taken 120 so far.
Okay. Yeah, that's a total of 120 prep taken so far. It's going to be basically just down.
Oh, wait, Lily, sorry. Can we take one more
Oh, yeah.
second?
Sorry. One more second. Sorry, that was another 5 seconds. We've taken 125 of prep. Okay, it's basically just going to be going down the AF case. Okay, time will start now. Start off at the top, a few things overall. First, realize they never told us we have to reply in second case, so whatever they say there is non-relevant. But then second, what you have to realize that overall, they're actually not disrupting oppression. They're actually decreasing accessibility to this debate activity. A few warrants. First, they harm small school debaters. People generally learn theory from well-established teams or expensive debate camps. Allowing people to win because of their advantages and not their skills explicitly excludes small school debaters and socioeconomic underprivileged people. That violates fairness this. That's not increasing accessibility, it's doing the opposite. But then second, realize that they harm creativity. Using theory over and over again allows debaters to not actually come up with points and research skills on the topic, instead recycling old theory files that were given to them. That violates education because debate is supposed to teach us brainstorm and research skills. That's not happening. But then third is the research skew. It's unreasonable to ask debaters who don't know how to respond to theory to have as much research against theory and their opponents have against normal points. But fourth, we tell you theory is a different kind of debate. It's like if they read a policy case and we are expecting a public forum case. We need more than 3 minutes in first crossfire to understand how a different form of debate works if we've literally never hit or heard of this debate before, which we haven't. But then fifth is hitting theory is like different than hitting a different point on the topic that is resolutional, because A, you still know the debate vocab and link when it's resolutional, and B, you can delink non-unique or turn a point. That doesn't apply to theory. But then if you really want to talk about disrupting oppression, go back to the substance and the topicality. You're going to be voting next so that you don't embolden China to invade Taiwan or the Senkaku Islands, which we would know would lead to like 500,000 deaths. That's going to be the most like oppressive impact in this round. A few things. First, talk about their like Louisville debate. They talk about disrupting like white supremacy and racism in the debate structure. A few things. First, realize that inherently by decreasing accessibility, they're only adding to that. That's because people that like aren't privileged enough to, for example, to spend like $1,000 on a debate camp can't participate in this type of activity today. But then let's go on to the specific things. First, they talk about how they disrupt oppression first through small schools. First, turn this argument, they disadvantage small schools because of the research and time scale. Most small schools don't know how to debate theory. That's totally unfair. But then second, they talk about survival skills. They say to you that like debating impact calculus or topical resolutional arguments isn't really helping with life skills. I would contest this harshly. First, you have to realize that debaters inherently gain so many research skills they wouldn't gain. That helps them for the rest of their life. Second is communication skills. Debaters realize how to communicate with others in a business setting and how to communicate with their partners. But three, there's literally been studies done that show that debaters go on to be more successful, have better occupations, go to better colleges. I would say that's a pretty good life skill. But then fourth, we tell you that it does help debaters get into politics. Just because you're a debater doesn't mean that you're going to like be president, sure, but it does mean that you're more likely to like have a likelihood to be like engaged in politics. But then they talk about like survival schools and probability. But then go on to their third point about accessibility. Again, realize they inherently decrease accessibility for all those reasons. Time skew. If you don't have the money to go to a debate camp, that's not really helping. Then they talk about how by like disrupting in a round that's live stream, you're going to like set a precedent to fight racism in the debate space. That's not true. There's no actual like impact that's been seen. There's been theory run time and time again. I would say the best way to increase accessibility is to do things like start a nonprofit debate camp, which our debate team is literally doing in the status quo. But then I would tell you that you're actually going to want to see something that's going to make actual change, debate the resolution, so then you can see that more debaters get involved in the activity when they know they have a better chance of like engaging it and they know they are not going to lose to like random theory. Then they bring up concentration camps. I would say don't bring that up. All of our ancestors have been killed in a concentration camp. That's not accessible. All right, are you ready for cross?
Yes, I am.
Great. Would you like the first question?
Sure. Okay. I guess Jen kind of addressed. Oh, are you good?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay, cool. I guess Jen kind of addressed this in the first speech. You said you don't know how Article 9, what Japan would have to do to change the constitutionality of Article 9, but then you also say it would help us gain skills and research practices and help us become more likely to become policymakers. But insofar as you don't even know how the political process works, like what change do you create?
Wait. I mean, I can like try to explain to you how the like Japanese diet works. I would say just because I don't know how like one of the hundreds of countries in the world amends every law doesn't mean I haven't learned anything from debate. But I can tell you right now, they would probably need 2/3 of majority, also known as a super majority in the House of Councilors and House of Representatives. That makes up the diet in Japan. Do you mind if I take a question?
Go for it.
Right. How are you guys increasing accessibility through your K?
Yeah, I guess there's a few things that we'll obviously talk about in the future, but yeah, sure. The first way is by combating biases that exist within public forum. I think the first thing that and the major project that inspired us to create this case is hearing a lot of judges give extremely problematic comments, whether this is like commenting on people's voices, whether it is like telling people that like racism arguments aren't strategic because there'll always be like backseat to like extinction outweighs, whether it's like competitors telling us they get mad when they get called out for accessibility concerns. We try to normalize that form of engagement that allows for those call outs. And by debating these sorts of things constantly, it'll help deconstruct biases as a whole. Our project isn't just one blanket statement, oh, we talked about this, now like our problems are solved, but rather transforming the way public forum operates.
You mind if I take a follow-up? It's really quick.
Of course. Yeah.
Have you guys debated this like case throughout all of TOC and like past tournaments?
Yeah, actually we've debated, me and Jen have debated together at 3 tournaments besides TOC, the Palm Classic, Golden Desert, and Harvard. We wrote this halfway through Palm Classic, and once it was written, we read it every single round after Palm
What
Classic.
about all of
then
the
we read it every round at Harvard,
Okay,
and then we read it 4 rounds here. We
You
just didn't read it
guys-
in front of parents because they said that they would make them uncomfortable.
Did you guys do that like when you were debating with other partners too? Because I know you guys like debating.
This was my first time doing PS. Jen's my
Okay.
only partner.
Would you like a question?
If you have another, you can go, but if not, yeah,
Okay,
sure.
Sure. I can take a question then. Let's talk about the substance, right? What would be the impact if China invades Taiwan or the Senkaku Islands?
I guess this is something, a fundamental misunderstanding of the way we think this debate should operate. You were talking about a hypothetical consequence of a plan that never is going to happen. The judges signing a neg ballot doesn't mean China invasion doesn't happen.
I mean, I would
our
say
argument.
false. We'd contest.
Wait, you think like the 3 judges in this room signing a negative ballot will prevent like actually foreign policy and change like Japanese policy? How is like
I mean,
7
I don't
people
think
in a Zoom
that's
call
not what I'm
going to
saying.
affect Japanese policy?
That's not what I'm saying. And we contest that in speech by telling you all the ways debate does affect policy, but that's cross.
We're gonna take some prep.
I think that's all of y'all's prep time.
Yep. It's just going to be extending and down the responses. Is anyone not ready?
Sorry, can you give me the order again? It's
Oh, yeah.
and then the China page you said?
It'll probably start on our page, like just extending our case and down their responses. I'll start my time then.
Also, wait, just for the thing in the order, if you flowed like overview from rebuttal and on another page, we're just gonna be cross-applying it to the responses.
Oh yeah, my bad. I flowed that all in one page. That's probably why. Okay. Even in second rebuttal, they don't give you a clear lens through which to view this round. So extend our role to the ballot. Vote for the team that best disrupts oppression in this space. We're going for the war about survival skills. We allow debates to challenge racialized structures. Every student will interact with racist structures far more than will actually become policymakers. We always outweigh on the probability of generating useful portable skills, especially in PF where detailed plans are literally banned. This independently outweighs arguments about topical discussion because our skills are more portable across the board. Not only that, we give you the time frame more as to like why we have to change debate right now because we're going to be leaving for college, but we'll always have time to hone policymaking skills. But debate is problematic right now, and that's why we're reading this right now. Group all of their small school responses and hitting theory is different, and prefer our warrants and empirics over their assertions. 1, Ks are easier for small schools and minorities. A, they can just prep one thing for the entire year and not have to deal with big schools like Blake and Potomac producing 100 times the amount of substantive prep in 1 week. B, nothing about it is inherently inaccessible. They just assert this. BPI, debate drills, YouTube all explain how they work and give in-depth explanations and resources. And C, this proves the importance. Normalizing it will force more people to learn about it and make this more common. 2, this is empirically disproven in LD and policy. Smaller teams will read case to avoid massive prep burdens. And 3, everyone engages in debate and thinks about it. Thus, there's nothing that is exclusive. You just have to intuitively think about what debate should look like. And if this is something people can't do, it proves our importance because people should start thinking about these things. And 4, you say you don't know how to respond and topical debate is better because of things like dealings and turns, but that's proven false by your own response where you were able to engage with your own knowledge of debate and what is basically a version of things like dealings. On creativity, 1, no, under our method, it would be people reading different methods and engaging them. It's a method be method debate. 2, our model includes topical debates as well. We just think people should have the ability to do what they are comfortable with without being delegitimized. 3, we brainstorm and research other things like critical literature, which is equally relevant to the world. Then on research skew and the prep skew argument, 1, critical thinking solves. That's why our form of debate is good. It allows for people to just think about debate and come up with arguments instead of having a topical argument that you don't have prep or knowledge about. 2, topical arguments can be equally unpredictable. If they pull something out that you haven't heard of, you'll also be unprepared. 3, affirming our method and normalizing it makes it more predictable, so voting for us solves. 4, you can use your case and make reasons as to why you think your method of topical debate is good for combating. On the live stream and impact level responses and the nonprofit debate camps, 1, this isn't enough. It's about changing the way debate operates as a whole. Free camps don't fix the Orientalist perspectives that are violent or judges that refuse to listen to like any other types of arguments. Camps are the ones teaching this logic. Then group their research skills and communication skills arguments. They've just conceded way too much here. 1, extend Lockwood. Their knowledge production will always be violent and fueled with Orientalism. That's why our side is more important. Extend the 3-point from the overview. 1, people like Ted Cruz and Matt Gaetz proves that as long as policymaking and debate itself is violent, it'll breed violent people in the policymaking space. Then extend the 7-point that PF debate isn't policymaking. Impact calculus and non-detailed plans or even like research just don't provide the skills that translate over presidential debates or congressional hearings. Don't do that. Our skills are translatable. We also create communication and research skills about different things. On the more successful and better colleges, 1, people still get debate accolades just from debating different things. And remember the pre and post fiat distinction. We've made reasons as to why our method does something while they don't. Your ballot doesn't stop Japan militarization, but it does change norms. They concede our solvency about the Louisville Project and Emporia SW and this round being streamed. So it's an easy app ballot.
We'll take a bit of prep time. All right, we had that as 120. That's good with everyone. I'm going to be starting off on roll of the ballot, then going on to our side, the substance, and going back to the theory. Is everybody ready to begin? Okay. Our opponents try to tell you that we conceded the roll of the ballot. However, it's not fair to say that we needed to respond to that in second speech. We tell you that that decreases accessibility because we do not have the prep time to respond to it in that short amount of time. But we tell you that the role of the ballot is, they tell you themselves that the role of the ballot is to increase accessibility. We would say that the only way to increase accessibility is for a resolutional topical debate, because that is the only way for fairness to exist in the debate space, because that is the only way that everyone goes into a round with the same preparedness in terms of knowing what the debate is going to be about. But go to our side, we tell you that we're the only ones who solve this accessibility. We debate the resolution where we tell you that, or we give you our entire case that's resolutional, and we tell you that when you see the resolution be passed, we tell you that Chinese trust decreases, we see them increase aggression, and we tell you that they're going to invade Taiwan and Senkaku Islands, leading to thousands and thousands of deaths. That's incredibly bad. But we tell you that we win the roll of the ballot. We are the only ones who are debating resolutionally. They give you a few responses. They tell you that Ks are easier to run for smaller schools. 2 responses here. First of all, that means that smaller schools have to have knowledge about Ks in the first place. That is incredibly unlikely, considering that Ks do not have a huge presence in the debate space, and they should not, because unless you know how to run a K, it is incredibly hard to do so. We tell you that Ks are hard to learn how to run, because in order to know how to run a K, you have to A, put in hours and hours of research into learning about Ks, or B, go to an incredibly expensive debate camp, which decreases accessibility because debate camps are far too expensive to expect everybody to go to learn about Ks. We tell you that resolutional debate is always the most accessible because the resolutions pertain to topics that we learn about in daily life. We learn about them in the news. It is incredibly easy to access. They tell you that you can do hours and hours of YouTube research. However, we tell you that still decreases accessibility because small schools go into a debate without the knowledge of what they are going to be debating. That decreases accessibility. But we tell you that it particularly hurts the people of color that they talk about, because we tell you that people of color in the United States are more likely to be underprivileged, meaning that they especially do not have the money to go to debate camps. That is incredibly problematic. They also tell you that they're advocating for a continuation of conversations. However, our opponents came in here and never asked us to have a conversation about this issue in the first place. They do not solve themselves. They've never even started a conversation that they say they solve for. We tell you that the only thing they're doing is discouraging debaters from joining the space because running theory causes debaters who A, do not have the time or money to learn about Ks, and B, come from small schools, come into debates not knowing what they are going to be debating. That increases inequality, meaning that we have to come up with responses to something that we have never even heard of in the same amount of time that they have to prep out a case that they've heard about hundreds of times. That is incredibly unfair. But we also tell you that they're able to recycle old theory files over and over again, meaning once again that there is an incredible time skew. The only thing that our opponents are doing, if you vote AF, is increasing inaccessibility.
Are you good for Grand Cross?
Yes. We're gonna just both speak on this computer.
Okay, we should really do that too. Okay,
You guys
cool.
want the first question?
Can we take first? Oh, wait, sorry, what?
I said, yeah, do you guys want the first question?
Yes, please. So I guess their first question is, when Potomac, schools like Potomac and Blake are only prepping topical prep, and they have like 20 coaches doing topical prep outs. Why does that any better than like someone reading a K?
Yeah,
a few
so,
reasons.
oh yeah, do you wanna go?
Yeah, so first is that even if they have great prep routes, they can spend as much money as they want on coaches, their opponents, even if they're from a tiny school, when they come in, they know what they're debating. They know what they need to prepare to engage in that debate. That does not apply to Ks whatsoever. Like, given our circumstance, we didn't come in like expecting a K. We didn't prep out a K. That means we're not on the same level of preparedness. Do you mind if I take a question?
Of course.
Yeah. All right. So would you guys say that a better way to like increase accessibility in the debate space is like to encourage more debaters to come into the activity?
Yeah, so we would agree that having debaters in the space is essential to accessibility, but our argument is that in the current form of debate, we're pushing debaters out, and that's why we're reading what we're reading.
How are we pushing debaters out?
Like, oh, you want Like I guess like the bigger problem, the biggest problem is when like people try to read substantive arguments about things that aren't war and economy based. Not only are competitors reading problematic arguments like racism is non-unique, but judges are giving extremely problematic decisions and that like enforce violence on debaters that they
Wait,
remember
but
for a
Wouldn't
lifetime.
you agree? Wouldn't you agree that it's more important to have a bigger diversity of the pool of people in PF than to have more people who are able to pay for these debate camps to learn how to run Ks coming into this space and overcrowding it and crowding out the people who don't have the resources to learn how to
We
run
think
it?
Our
that-
issue with that is that you make these assertions about kids taking hours and thousands of dollars to learn, but that assertion isn't really like backed up by any. It doesn't really interact with.
I mean, I think
why
you can
And-
think of
Ks are
our
lower than
arguments logically, right? So if you go into an activity like PF where the design for the activity is you get a topic, you debate it. If you go into an activity like that and you're thrown into a round and you lose the round because that's not how you're going to do the activity in the round because someone runs theory on you, then that's decreasing accessibility, right? Because you don't have the preparedness.
I guess like wait, can I just say one thing? I guess the bigger problem is like pushing queer and people of color out of the debate space because of violent judges and only leaving white people as the only people who are comfortable in the space is not a good model. We think that topical debates can be good. It's just that in their current form, they're entrenched with violence. That's our Lockwood evidence that talks about how we only use Eurocentric views on IR and things like that. So we think that your method can be good. It just isn't now.
Okay, yeah, we would just say the only way to solve that is accessibility. I would ask if you want a question, but we have like 4 seconds.
Yeah, that's cross.
Okay. The order is going to be framing, case. I'll signpost star in case. Let me know when everyone's good. Cool. Extend a role valid. It's functionally conceded. They kind of go for offense under it. Vote for the team that best disrupts oppression. The survival skill warrants is conceded that our role of the ballot allows for the best skills because we're actually going to use them against racialized structures and it allows to reform debate itself. Now, our method is our method isn't properly interacted with. Our argument is that when we engage in non-traditional forms like reading a non-topic affirmative, rejecting the resolution, and engaging in non-traditional evidence like paradigm quotes and debate authors, it allows for new forms of debate because when your ballot normalizes our arguments, it allows for a shift towards these sorts of arguments, empirically proven by Louisville Project and Emporia SW. And this is uniquely key because the round is streamed. So our affirmation of method is even more important because you can signal to the entire debate community that our method is good. Now on the small schools debate, there's a few devastating concessions. The first is the B point. The B point is terminal defense. That's defense that things like YouTube videos and VBI debate trolls, all free accessible things prove that you can engage in K debate. These aren't hour-long videos. Nothing about K debate is different. You engage in warrants, etc., and you make framing arguments. Nothing is unique. And they've also conceded an argument that it's more accessible because everyone engages in debate and already knows about things like debate and knows about things about debate, which means the most accessible thing because everyone engages in these sorts of projects. This is all. They've also conceded the empirical evidence that the smaller schools and LD and policy read case to avoid prep outs. Now they say that we don't allow for a conversation, but our argument isn't just about a conversation. It's about changing the ways in which debate operate as a whole, not just a conversation. Affirming our method changes the debate structure itself. The last argument is that we recycle old theory files, but they've conceded an argument that you debate under different methods. Just to cover my bases on the research skew and prep arguments that debaters can't prep against this, but they've conceded that topic arguments can be equally unpredictable. If they pull something out that you haven't heard of, they will be equally unprepared. And the most important argument on both the small schools argument and the strat skew arguments is that affirming our method, normalizing it, making it more predictable. So voting for us solves all of your offense. The fact that they think it's so unpredictable proves the importance of our case. Also, just remember, the ballots to vote for the debater that best disrupts oppression, voting for us actually does something. Voting for them ensures that white debaters get to keep doing what they're doing.
We have 20 seconds left to prep, so we're just going to take that.
Okay, if everyone's ready, it's going to be really briefly on our case, the con case, then on to pro. Everyone good? Okay. First, just to remember our case, we tell you that right now China isn't emboldened. If you revise Article 9, vote F, that's when you're going to see that China is emboldened. They're going to invade the Senkaku Islands and Taiwan. That's going to kill up to 500,000 people. They don't interact with the swans. But then go on to their case. First, start off at the top. What you have to realize overall is that they tell you that like K debate isn't exclusionary. That's not true. If the judges vote for them, it just shows that they're winning and we're being pushed out of an activity because we didn't get like the proper preparation to deal with it. That's unfair in and of itself. A few things. First, they try and talk about like disrupting oppression as the main thing. They never asked to like have a conversation with us. They never asked for us to like just have a discussion instead of around on like how we can help these issues. We'd have been down to that. That would have been more effective. But then second, they try and tell you that like small school debaters still have access to like respond to theory. That's not true. First, they tell you that YouTube research still exists. YouTube research isn't the same as someone like getting $800 worth of experience from a debate camp. But second, we tell you most small schools literally don't even know what a K is. We like for us that had never hit a K in round before, like we didn't know how it was run, anything like that. That's not really inclusionary if you ask me. But then they tell you that like you're going to get more survival skills from debating like non-topical resolution and like debating racial structures than debating. We still tell you that there's so many research skills, communication skills, there's more intelligence gained, and it helps debaters get into politics to debate resolutionally. That's because then when you have those skills, you can actually go on to make big real world change, such as like disrupting racial systems. But then what you have to realize is inherently Ks are disruptive and they are less accessible because if you go into a round as someone that has never hit a K, never heard of a K, don't know how to hear a K, then if you lose that round because you literally didn't have any skills or preparation going into it, that's going to disincentivize debaters to join the activity. The only way to reduce like the racial structures in debate is to do resolutional debates because then more people, such as people of color and people of less socioeconomic status, are incentivized to join into debate. That's how we solve. Thank you. Great round, guys.
Good debate.
Thank you,
Good round.
judges.
Great round, and thank you all for judging.
All right, the decision's in. I'm good to announce if that's easiest for you, Cayman and Ben. I'll wait for Ben to come back. Cool. Cayman, you're good with that? Cool. All right, I'll announce. Congratulations to both teams for making it to the TOC octafinals. Amazing work, both of you. The decision is a 3-0 for the affirmative. I will go first with my decision. I will note that I have a bunch of notes for both sides, given I have debated in and coach and have been a lab leader for both Lincoln Douglas policy and public forum. And I am in fact a current policy debater, so I have lots of thoughts I can probably help and texture your arguments with, since I think both sides missed out on a lot of points for clash that we can do in the future. Cool. My decision. The role of the ballot. I start here. It's the clearest point in the final foci where there is judge instruction. I default to voting for the team that best disrupts oppression. I think that the AF needed to explain after this extension why the neg cannot access this explicitly. However, they extend the Gillens and Page cruel optimism argument at the end of their last speech, which is defense to the negative's capacity to leverage their case against the AF. The neg didn't answer this argument the entire debate, thus I put the neg's case aside since I think the question of access in this particular round outweighs, given there is no internal link to resolving oppression in the negative's world. The AF went all in on needing survival skills and real-world education to challenge racialized structures. The neg's main piece of offense is critiques bad because they make accessing debate impossible. Both sides needed to do way more impact work in terms of why each mode of exclusion outweighs and or turns their opponent's impacts. However, the neg is extending their arguments without answering the affirmative. Even if the affirmative is not doing enough impact work, I think the negative is doing even less. The AF is winning that critiques are in fact accessible, and even if they are not now, voting AF will make critiques more normalized and thus more predictable, which solves the negative's offense. The small schools argument is empirically untrue given LD and policy debate programs. That's an arg that went conceded the entire debate. The AF is also straight turning the negative's arguments about research, since there would be a deeper dive into systems of oppression that constitute each topic and their model, which is more valuable education-wise given the concession of the Gillens and Page evidence in the AF's uniqueness frame. I have some thoughts, but I'll let the other judges go first with their decisions, and then I will share some tips and tricks for everybody and points of arguments that you should make and things I would precaution against in the future.
You want to go, Ben, or should I?
You go.
All right. So I reluctantly vote for Broward on the pro. I think that Newton South doesn't really establish their own role of the ballot until second summary. And like rebuttal says they had to have a roll of the ballot in case. And then other rebuttal says, no, we don't. That's unfair, which sure, that's cool. But then give me something else there. Tell me what it is. Give me some idea of what I should vote for. Like the previous judge said, those are explicit judge instructions about what to do in a round when teams are otherwise talking past each other, how the judge should think about the round. And I think that you need to offer one before second summary, because then either they can't respond to it or it justifies to do stuff in final focus. I also think that there are two other things that Broward so that Newton South needs to do to have a shot at ballot here. The first is to respond to the Lockwood 19 evidence on case, which has big implications on both flows. It's your case doesn't go untouched throughout the route. You treat it like it does, but the idea that the scenarios that you are talking about are a self-fulfilling prophecy of racist and violent knowledge production is something that needs to be dealt with, because that's specifically in the context of Asian geopolitics and debate. And I think that there just needs to be some kind of acknowledgement that you heard that and dealt with that, rather than just treating it like there's nothing said about that. Lastly, I don't think that there's anything done about the impact turns to fairness. Like, they're never claiming to be fair in this round. They're saying that your conceptions of fairness are bad and that it's better for debate for you to feel like this is unfair and change how you debate because of it than to actually deal with that. I don't give much, if any, weight to the cruel optimism argument because I don't think it's actually implicated or explained by the pro team. But I do think that it is another place that potentially, if those three things hadn't been missing, I might have still been persuaded to vote for them. I guess my biggest question for pro is, how does affirming solve for violent judges? Because that's something that's never actually explained, but it's also something that's never actually challenged. 3 judges who are predisposed to accept this kind of argument voting for y'all doesn't necessarily mean that other people will change their paradigms. Also, 2 of your 4 quotes are from people's policy sections of their paradigms, just so you know for future rounds. That is perhaps not the best example of this being a problem unique to public forum. I've talked with the people who were involved in these things. I debated from, I'm going to show age here, 1996 to 2006 in various forms of policy in high school and college. And I got to watch this grow from Louisville 2000. And there's a lot going on here that's not being contextualized. I would suggest, if you're going to keep running this argument, read the argument that Dr. Reed Brinkley wrote in 2018. I'll put a link to that in the ballot. But there's a lot just about the time frame of what you're saying about PF and white flight and the Louisville project that just doesn't add up. Emporia SW gets blipped at the end there as well. And that's ironic because the S in SW, who was also the S in Rutgers SR, was the New Jersey Public Forum champion in high school and then transitioned to policy later on with the skills from traditional public forum. So there's a lot going on there. This is something I've talked with Elijah about in the past as well. But I think that the arguments that you are making here about exclusion don't really work the way that you want them to, because what you are doing in your case makes sense. What you're doing in the round is you are telling me they're not using the right jargon, so you can't vote for them. They're not doing this in the speech we want them to. They're doing this in the order we want them to. And I think that they can make the argument that that is a form of exclusion that outweighs as well, because it takes people who could do this kind of debate and pushes them away from it. But I don't want to get into how Louisville changed between Berner and between when Darrell Birch came in 2003. I don't want to get into how the actual white flight started as a backlash to what Towson did with the Black aesthetic. And I really, really don't want to get in whether it matters whether public forum was created for white flight or just became a convenient destination for white flight. But all of those are things that you should resolve yourselves before continuing to run an argument like this, because a team who has waded through the cesspool that was eDebate archives in the early 2000s is going to make you look really bad and cross if they do understand the timeline of what happened here. Don't want to go off on a tangent. Those 3 things are the big things that I think that need to be done in order to make this a debate. Without them, I've got pretty clear instructions of what my ballot should be doing, and I'm not really getting an alternative that isn't preemptively impact turned.
Yeah, I voted for the AF team too. I'm just I put my my flow with all my comments in the ballot, so you can just look at my flow. I'll just give 2 quick comments. Dating myself, I was also there when it was happening. I was also participating in some of it. So it's really interesting to hear this debate happen. And thanks for letting me judge. For the con team, Lily and Pearl, a few questions I think you should ask teams that read arguments like this against you. The first one is, if the purpose of this is simply disruption, why is a ballot necessary? I think that the pro team is really good on a few things, which is kind of creating a narrative around why debate is bad. And I don't really think you all have an answer to why debate is inherently good. So my suggestion would be kind of to begin targeting what the purpose, and I think kind of Cayman got to a little bit this early, which is what's the purpose of the actual ballot. But you need some tangible defense and offense that exists too. So an easy route for that is to read defenses of debate. You want to talk about scenario planning. You want to talk about simulation. You want to talk about why discussing nuclear war is good. You need to read arguments that say all of those things. The second thing is, this is a really weird conversation to have about what we need to do to fight white flight. How many people in this room is white? How many of y'all identify as white? So listen. So if we can say that there isn't a massive amount of people in here that are white, if there's not this overwhelming number of people that are just proving that it's white, because I don't know if I think that PF is white flight coming from policy in the States. I would say PF don't have as many white people as other groups of people, is all I'm gonna say. But it definitely don't have a lot of black people. This kind of the so have a defensive debate. I think that's important because right now I don't think you really have a defensive debate. And I think if you have a strong defense of why high school students debating about international relations and looking at different perspectives is important. And I give that very specific example because that card exists. And it's from 2022. You can get it. It's just a little Google search. All right. That one piece of evidence disrupts 90% of their offense because they don't read a single piece of evidence really about international relations outside of this Orientalism card. They don't actually have an argument for why the topic is bad. They have an argument for why debate is bad. And you're letting them frame the entire debate around, you have to win now that the game is good enough to play. They've won. The game is racist. And y'all are like, okay, but still China could invade. And what? You get how you can't make that jump? So you just, that's what you got to answer. And I could tell that you all were frustrated. You're like, small schools, that argument really doesn't work because it's probably not true. People can't afford to pay for camps. Y'all, this is the TLC. I would dare wager everyone in this room has been to a camp before. And everyone that's judging has probably worked at a camp. It's the TLC. Okay, so I'm sorry. So you've never been to a camp before, a debate camp?
No, we've never paid for any debate training.
That's not what I asked. But I said, have you
No,
ever
we've
been
never
to a
been
camp?
to a camp. But it's you can continue with
Okay, no, I got you. Okay, well, listen, I'm just saying for the majority of people that are at the TOC, they probably have. So do you get how, from a judge perspective, absent you having some very overwhelming reason to why that's true, it's just not going to be a very, so like arguments like that don't get you where. Don't play their game. All right, it's a game. Beat them at their own game. Say, excuse me, debate gives us these benefits. Simulation is good. Scenario planning is good. Discussing of apocalyptic rhetoric, those things are good. All of your arguments about how debate is racist, people are racist. We know that. Our argument is, what do we do to figure out a way to solve it? And right now, you just said, we're going to interrupt you and get a ballot. That don't stop people from being racist. As a matter of fact, it probably increases it. They're going to hate you and attribute all of their racism they have now towards the argument to the thing you just did to them, which has made them feel racist. Like, this is just true, y'all. I'm excited to see Case coming to PF because, I mean, my team's going to win a whole lot more debates if I actually get to coach Case. We do all right, but we can win a whole lot more if we get to run some Ks. You hear me? For the AF team, a couple of comments for you all, and the rest of the stuff is in the flow. You can look at it. Two things. First, your ballot framing is kind of clunky. It needs to be more specific. Look at the judges you have. Read their paragraph, their paradigms. What is it about the judges that you can direct and say, as a judge, this is what you can and cannot say about this thing? Right? Build that up into an additional argument of why a conversation about fairness is really a conversation of how trust, when racialized, is always misplaced. Does that argument make sense to you all? That develops your argument into something I think a little bit sound. Also, I tend to agree with them that I'm not sure that they have to respond or make a roll of the ballot in the first speech. I do think you should probably make one in the second speech. I also think there should be one in the third speech. I also think it's probably fair in the second rebuttal to just jettison the entirety of your case and read like topicality in this debate. And I probably would be willing to vote for that as a theory argument just because, I don't know, you probably could have did that in a constructive too, actually. No, there's tension. Yeah, that's all I got unless people have specific questions, but the rest of my comments are in here. Better judge ballot framing stuff from the AF team and more contextualized arguments to their case. You can't point out why their evidence is problematic, how it proves their research model is bad, how it proves that they perpetuate the single thing you said debate does. Just give me a link. I'm asking, last thing, don't say Ted Cruz creates rapists. That's like big red flag. really easy place to turn the entire case. I think you lose immediately if they get up and say there's no content or trigger warning that exists with you being able to make arguments like this, which is why your style of debate is problematic. And I almost vote immediately on that argument, given the context of your argument of accessibility. Does that make sense? So just say it creates more violent tendencies or something. I don't think we have to be descriptive or graphic in our explanations. All right, that's all I got. I'll be quiet now.
I second a lot of what Ben just said. A lot of my extra comments that I'd love to be able to get into now with you all, just because I am in college debate right now, and a lot of the debates I end up having are framework debates about this very issue, so would love to share some tips and tricks with you all from one debater to another. For the affirmative, you all need to spend way more time on your second half constructive applying your critique of Orientalism to the negatives case. You never go to their case. I think Ben was saying this. They literally are saying China is evil. You read a card in your own case. Calling China evil is threat construction. That's racist. 0 words. We didn't even extend that in the second half constructive. What happened? They literally fell for your trap. And you let them? They extended it as offense in every speech. 0 words on it. You could have literally then just said, even if you don't think we solve or what we're saying is good, don't vote for them because what they're doing is bad. That way you have 2 win conditions, which we want, right? If you're AF, don't you want as many ways to win as possible? AF good, neg bad? Now they have to answer and justify what they said? And they aren't because the way they responded to you kind of proves they won't? Come on, y'all, like, do the kind of critique debating you want to see in the activity, meaning apply your critique to the debate. If your model is about critiquing how Orientalism underlies international relations, show us, tell us, do the work. You should lean way more into your push-out arguments. Psychological violence is an impact the neg drop the entire time. That ties into your arguments about racism and Orientalism, meaning if we talk about Orientalism or China in a really racist way, what is the impact on debaters? Don't even have to get into push-out. Just talk about how certain arguments or pedagogical or epistemological devices that we use in debate are violent. And that's why your model is net better and provides uniqueness. But even if it doesn't, it's a reason to reject every single instance of, which is what Tuck and Yang, I think, is more about rejection, not about interruption. Rejection versus interruption, that's a huge distinction. You all should do more research into that, especially because you're combining Orientalism with an argument about anti-Blackness from DSRB, with an argument about settlerism from Tuck and Yang. That is also a weird combo of theory the negative could have pointed out. There is no one basis of structural oppression here. They're saying all of this, and thus vote for us. How? Solvency questions matter, folks. 2AR, you need way more impact work. You end up going all in on their best piece of offense, which was their only offense about small schools. Why didn't you extend any impact they dropped? Especially if you're going all in on how your model of clash still operates. Pratik, you had quotes from from people's paradigms, but why didn't you include quotes from your opponents? The negative said things like, we get more intelligence from not debating Ks. This is not applicable. Have a conversation instead. That was all pretty messed up. I actually would have voted AF almost immediately if you said the way they talk about our model of debate, that we say comes from a legacy of Black debaters that we should listen to. Why didn't you point that out? If you have quotes from judges, like Heyman said, we can't evaluate that, but we can evaluate what happened in this debate. That's another reason not voting negative solves, right? What they said was problematic, especially given everything you all have said. Also, use your white flight arguments more. I'm obviously younger than others, maybe not obvious, I don't know, but like, I was really compelled with like how I have experienced history of public forum and how I've debated in public forum, in LD and policy. I've witnessed quite a lot of violence in public forum. Maybe it's not why public forum originated, but have you talked about like the history of public forum being called the Ted Turner model of debate, where this huge like billionaire was able to fund money into the creation of public forum that he thought was acceptable? That is a true history, whether or not everyone agrees, but maybe still, I disagree. Ted Turner model of debate was definitely what public forum was called for a while. He showed up to the final round of I believe one of the tournaments, I forget which one, but either way, I think the showing of all of the judges having different takes on the history of public forum probably indicates that there needs to be like more research done by the affirmative into how you describe this history, given it's just like people all disagree about it. For the negative, theory is not a critique. That's the first thing you all need to kind of learn. Critiques are part of topic research. The AF should have pointed this out. They are just problematizing the structures that you're wanting to talk about. Theory is a question of in-round abuse, centering on the question of whether or not your opponents should or should not have said or done something like disclose or not. Theory begs the question of issues outside of the resolution proper. That is not what a critique entails. I didn't really understand the offense or the application here. The negative had to do way more impact work. Why is your model better? Why does it solve? I just don't have any impact from the negative really besides small schools, but you all are dropping all this defense here. It's kind of problematic for you to win. Even if you're extending your case, tell me why that matters more and why that outweighs. Again, your rhetoric I found was problematic, and I think the app should have pointed out immediately. But also, I don't think you all are really even responding to what the affirmative is saying in their line by line. If your model is about forefronting clash, I think it'd be helpful to show why or what that looks like. And if they don't, maybe point that out. Also, if you all just got up and said they dropped our case, they didn't apply any of their arguments, don't do that work for them, proves how it's not applicable to our model, that's an argument you can make or point out, right? It's a performative contradiction for them to say it's better clash, we talk about these racialized structures. But like, they didn't. What does that tell you on the negative? What does that tell you about what their model would actually look like? So with that said, I just think like everyone had chances to actually apply their arguments, what the other team said, but especially on the app, I was just really expecting a lot more from you all, especially after the awesome evidence you have in your 1AC. But like when a team stands up and says one case, China is evil, let us begin. For 4 minutes and you have nothing to say on that? Except Gillens and Page? Come on. Why are you going for like fiat is illusory and to put it in policy language when you can just go for you are racist? We have evidence you have not answered, or your logic is problematic. You have not answered. Just look for the easy win.
I just want to say we're really sorry. We didn't mean to be problematic, and we're definitely gonna like do more research on the topic.
No. I don't mean that as offensive for you all to take personally. I just mean like for the affirmative, when you're making these arguments, look for in-round moments, because again, judges can evaluate that. And I know you all might not have meant that, and this might be a new model of debate you're interacting with, and like, do not take the 3 judges voting against you to say you're bad people, etc. Just means next time, like, do that research. It's worthwhile, especially given the direction PF wants to head. And also, PF doesn't require government implementation of anything. You all don't really have plans with the way a lot of these resolutions are worded. Plus, you have some resolutions that, like, don't really have a state actor. That means public forum can actually do really cool stuff. So maybe the negatives model does solve, because you don't require the kind of bad policy making that the affirmative requires. Maybe you even read a different case against this app. You could have chosen maybe a case that has a different impact, or pick something like China does something structurally violent. That's worthwhile to point out or stop. You can just make your argument and do that research.
I have a quick question for y'all. Do you think it's more persuasive to go for like the like rhetoric stuff of their like cases and like about the K as an independent voter, or just like as a dissent to their method?
It's an extension of your arguments. You read this Lockwood argument in the 1AC, extended on their case. You just don't go to their case the entire debate. If you go to their case and go, we impact turn the entire logic and that underlies all of their impacts, means even if they want to risk that China might invade Taiwan, it's not true. It doesn't matter what their impact calc tells you, that is the threat construction trap you have to refuse to fall for. That is what it looks like to refuse. Refuse to buy into that framing. That way, if you frame it around refusal at the very top of their case, then apply your critique to each impact scenario, from Senkaku's to, like, there's a lot of good critiques about the Senkaku's, I should mention, to critiques about Taiwan. You can do that work. Apply what you said. And that's like the first minute of your speech. You just answer what they said, apply what you said this is all a reason why our model is better. And if not, it's a reason why what they did should not be affirmed. That is what rejection looks like and why that solves. Every instance that refuses to fall for these traps is a better, more pedagogically valuable moment. Then you can do your case. It just became very top heavy where it felt like you all were reading blocks And then it just became a block v block debate versus applying these amazing criticisms. Critique debate is amazing and beautiful and valuable and educational because you apply and learn about how these structures operate when you actually have this clash. I say this as someone who is a critique debater and a policy debater. I do it all. But I do it all because I want to apply it and learn how these structures operate. We're not learning if we're just saying they're violent and moving on. You have to do that messy work, unfortunately. And that wasn't here in this debate.
Thank you so much. That really helps.
I guess kind of building off of that and what Ben put in the chat, just making sure everybody does read the chat because it's there for a reason. The way an old debate coach called the Duck used to put it, don't debate them, make them debate you. The more that you can take what's going on here and put it in a context that you're familiar and comfortable with and create clash, rather than doing these things on your opponent's terms, with your opponent's vocabulary, in your opponent's structure, whatever it may be, the better you will do in any round where both teams are approaching it from different sides. Really quickly on public forum history, because most people don't know the truth, and the truth is actually even worse. When it was a pilot event, they called it Ted Turner Debate because they wanted Ted Turner to fund it. They invited him to nationals. He never showed up. I was there. But they wanted it to be, but he wouldn't fund it, so they changed the name. They changed it to Crossfire Debate because you should emulate people like Tucker Carlson, the host of Crossfire. The actual history is so much worse. But yeah, they wanted it to be funded by Ted Turner. He wasn't interested. Then they tried Tucker Carlson. They didn't even get a bow tie from him. Then, because they didn't have an external funder, it ended up being called Public Forum instead, which was the name that Donis Roberts, one of the coaches who created it, wanted for it. But they kept looking for a funder for debate, and the only time they got one of those was when Big Questions came around and the Templeton Foundation jumped in. But Public Forum was created as a pilot event back when Louisville wasn't clearing any teams. It wasn't until around 2002, 2003 when Darrell Birch joined the coaching staff and Liz and Tanya actually started handing out hot L's to a lot of white teams that white flight started. And it didn't really make a big sort of public forum until Devin and Davon from Towson won seat at nationals with the black aesthetic argument. And that's when people decide, do we want to make a policy research league that's separate but equal policy in college, or do we want to shift over to a different event? And you can see a lot of policy expats jump to public forum at that point. But it doesn't matter that it wasn't created that way if people are avoiding. It's also a big difference. And I really do want to emphasize that Ben is right on this, that there was a difference between white flight and anti-blackness. You could have an event that has anti-black elements or that black debaters are historically and presently excluded from compared to participation in other events without it having been a destination for white flight.
But I'll say one more thing because I came and made me think of this. I think that what they're saying to do is literally the thing that we're saying provides context to the debate for the affirmative team. When you don't point out the specific things that they are doing, that's problematic. Then it's like, what's the real abuse here? What's the real link to the criticism? You're just telling me that debate is problematic, right? Which is why I said for the con team, I actually shared a couple of like an example of a block that I would have my students read in response to this type of argument in the comment section of the ballots. So you can see, because you don't have to go to camps to get help answering arguments. You just got to have community. That's that's kind of thing I want to push. So I do kind of appreciate the argument you're making, but I think there are ways for us to collectively increase debate. I mean, I could give the same thing to the affirmative team, but I think that like they are a little bit more knowledgeable about this subject. So, I mean, I can, if you all want it, just email me or whatever. I have your coaches email me. But the simple thing is, I think there are ways you all can answer this. I think that if the AF team is a lot better at contextualizing their argument to the specific things the negative team is saying, this debate is a lot harder to win. But since they didn't do that, I think you have the opportunity to kind of jettison your position and kind of reevaluate the debate. And at that point, it becomes really hard for the AF team. but good debate, you all. Good luck in the next round. I assume pairings are coming out. That's why people are popping in, so we should leave.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Oh wait, Tab, are you here right now?